everyone, this is our Catholicism and Culture presentation. This was made by me, Victoria Nikulina, Giselle Saletro, Kaya Lee, and Mason LaMonica.
So for starters, we do want to establish what Catholicism actually is. So here you can see that it says that it's a religion that follows the teachings of Jesus Christ and is led by the Pope, who actually resides in Vatican City. And in Catholicism, it is characterized by its unique beliefs, practices, and traditions, which include the 7 sacraments, the Creed, and a distinct understanding of the Bible and tradition.
So now religious ritual. So there's 4 parts. So first one, Mass, a weekly church service that usually happens on Sunday, which includes reading the Bible, receiving communion, which is the body and blood of Christ through bread and wine. And second one, baptism, which is ritual that welcomes a person into the church and let them be born again. And third, confessions, confessing your sins to the Christ and ask for forgiveness. And last one, Lent, the Easter. Catholics prepare for Easter by fasting, praying, and giving up things during Lent for 40 days.
Talking about the sacraments. So the sacraments are the special rituals that are being practiced in the Catholic Church that bring people closer to God. There are 7 sacraments, including baptism, communion, and confession, as we mentioned in the other slide. Each one marks an important moment in a Catholic's spiritual life and helps them grow in faith.
Next, we're actually going to be looking into praying, and praying is a practice that lets Catholics talk to God. People pray to ask for forgiveness, give thanks, and prayers can be spoken, silent, or read from the Bible and prayer books. Specifically in different cultures, prayers is actually going to be common around all Catholic religion, no matter where it's actually being practiced. So we can actually look further into this within our presentation.
In case of confessions, confession, also called reconciliation, is a Catholic sacrament where a person tells their sins to a priest and asks for forgiveness. It is a way to say sorry to God and receive His mercy. After confessing, the priest gives advice as a small act to do, called penance, to help the person grow spiritually. So now, in case of power, authority, and customs, so we're gonna show the 7 minutes long video, and that will cover that concept of power, authority, and customs.
In terms of customs, this first video will be going over some clothing and what that means. It's a video called Catholic Vestments Explained by Breaking in the Habit.
If you've ever been to a Catholic service of any kind, you know that our ministers wear very distinctive clothing. This is not some hipster church where the pastor wears jeans and a stylish jacket over a t-shirt. Come on. While the specifics of the styles have fluctuated over the years, the basic components of liturgical garb have existed for centuries, each with distinct symbolism. What do we wear and why do we wear it? This is Catholicism in Focus. We begin first with the alb, the long white robe worn underneath the other vestments and which is never omitted. You hear that, religious priests? No, you cannot wear your habit instead of an alb, even if it's white. Worn as a sort of base layer, the alb is meant to cover all ordinary clothes that might distinguish the minister, unifying all ministers into a common blank slate. This serves a practical focus, but also symbolizes the foundational unity we all share in baptism. In the book of Revelation, we read, "These are the ones who have survived the great period of trial. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb." For this reason, it is not only the ordained ministers that may wear an alb, but any baptized person serving in the liturgy. This includes acolytes, altar servers, lectors, and other lay ministers. Prior to the reform of the liturgy, ministers were required to say a prayer before putting on each piece of vestment. For the alb, they'd say, "Make me white, O Lord, and purify my heart, so that, being made white in the blood of the Lamb, I may deserve an eternal reward." Today, vesting prayers are recommended, but not required. For many, the alb will suffice in covering all of one's normal clothing, but sometimes additional coverage is needed around the neck. For this reason, there is an amice, a rectangular piece of linen with 2 long cloth ribbons worn around the neck. From the Latin word amicere, meaning to cover, and amictus, wrapped around, the amice was a head covering worn under the helmet in the Greco-Roman world to collect sweat. Introduced as a liturgical vestment by around the 8th century, it serves a practical purpose in that it collects sweat from the neck from wearing heavy vestments in non-air-conditioned churches, but also a spiritual one as well. It is armor to protect against the devil. Inspired by the words of St. Paul, take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, the word of God. The wearer would say the following prayer while putting it on. Place, O Lord, the helmet of salvation on my head to resist the attacks of the devil. Related to this is the cincture, a rope worn around the waist. Usually white to match the alb, it may also match the liturgical color of the vestments, reflective of the feast. Practically, it serves as nothing more than a belt, holding together the alb, which can often be very baggy. Spiritually, though, it is meant to symbolize the way one is bound by the law of God, particularly in the way of chastity. Thus, the optional prayer goes, Gird me, O Lord, with the cincture of purity, and extinguish in my heart the fire of concupiscence, so that the virtue of continence and chastity, always abiding in my heart, I may better serve thee. Today, the amice and cincture are optional, depending on the fit of the alb. If it covers everything and is not cumbersome, neither are required. What is not optional, but does take different forms, is the stole, the long scarf-like cloth worn around the neck. For priests and bishops, it's worn over both shoulders and hangs down the center, and for deacons, it is worn over the left shoulder and is connected at the hip. Originally, the stole was fashioned after the scarf worn by imperial officials, designating their dignity and authority of their position. For this reason, priests and bishops used to mimic the crisscross nature of the Roman soldiers, but today stoles hang straight down. Symbolically, stoles evoke two important yet related images for the priest: the authority of Christ and the yoke of Christ. When the minister puts on this vestment, he is reminded of the responsibility he has to lead and to carry the church.
The second snippet of a video we will be previewing is from Every Level of Catholic Church Hierarchy Explained by Sips with Sarah Adrian Lawson. We'll just be showing the first two levels to give a brief and overarching overview of the Catholic power structure and what it means to join that.
If you are a baptized member of the Catholic Church, this includes you. Congratulations! You're a member of the hierarchy of the Catholic Church.
Yay!
All jokes aside, as lay members of the Catholic Church, we actually have an important role to play. Paragraph 900 of the Catechism of the Catholic Church says, quote, since, like all the faithful, lay Christians are entrusted by God with the apostolate by virtue of their baptism and confirmation, they have the right and duty, individually or grouped in associations, to work so that the divine message of salvation may be known and accepted by all men throughout the earth. And the very next paragraph says, quote, lay people share in Christ's priestly office. For example, the laity are called to offer their whole lives, their work, their joys and sufferings to God. They do this through their participation in the Eucharist and in other liturgical celebrations. In short, our role as the laity of the Church is to live a life that is faithful to God and to spread the message of Christianity to as many people as possible. That message being that all of us are conceived with what is called original sin. And what that means is that from the moment we are conceived, we are basically property of Satan. And if we die in that state, we are going to go to hell with him at the end of our lives and be there for eternity. That doesn't sound good to me. I think I'd rather not do that. I don't know about you. But the good news is that Jesus gave us a way out. He sacrificed himself on the cross, and because of that sacrifice, we now can become adopted children of God. The way we do that is by receiving the gift of baptism and remaining in the family of God by receiving the other sacraments that his church administers. That is essentially the very summarized version of what the Christian message is, and it is our job as lay people to spread that message to as many people as we can. On to the next level of the Catholic Church hierarchy, we have deacons. Deacons essentially assist bishops and priests in various ministries, including service to the poor, liturgical functions, and administrative tasks. Now, there are two types of deacons. One of them is what is called transitional deacons. These are deacons that are eventually going to become priests. And the other is called permanent deacons. And these are deacons which are just always going to be deacons. They're not going to be priests eventually. And they can be married. And deacons can help out with different parts of the Mass, like reading the gospel readings. Sometimes they can give a sermon with the permission of the priest. They can lead the church in prayer during Mass. And they can also help out by distributing Holy Communion. So we see here that deacons are essentially assistants to priests and bishops. They don't have sacramental authority, but they can help the priest exercise his sacramental authority by assisting him in crucial church and liturgical things. Words.
So now you guys know what Catholicism is, so I'm gonna talk about Catholicism in Korea. So when you look at the presentation, there's three main points. So based on Korean culture, actually they really, so in the first place, most Koreans hate Catholicism because they have another religions. But then time passed, most Korean people have positive view because of dedication and volunteer spirit. And actually, the other reason why Catholicism has really positive view to Koreans because of the father Lee Tae-suk. Actually, he's dead, but when he's alive, he volunteered at Sudan, where the underwent the war. So I think that's why most Koreans really admire him, and then because his father, which is like, oh, we can't do it again. So another reason why Catholicism is really has a positive view in Korea because Father Lee Tae-suk, because he's actually currently dead, but when he's alive, he volunteered at Sudan where underwent the war, and then that's why most Koreans really admire him, and then it makes Catholicism to get a positive view. And actually there's special points, so it's a strong responsibility, and the reason why I wrote it down because actually so the Koreans who believe Catholicism have really strong responsibility. So according to research, we can know because the research covers that so Catholicism school in Korea, the teacher should believe Catholicism when he was born or when she was born. But actually compared to other countries, they don't need to do that. But so I think that's why I thought that was a special point, and I wrote it down. And when it comes to Korean rituals and comparison to Catholicism, there's a two represent points. So when it comes to Korean rituals, there's a Jesa, which is traditional Korean culture based on Confucianism, and otherwise Catholic rituals, Mass for Dead, which is Catholic prayer for the dead. Actually, it looks kind of same, but actually the object of prayer are different. So Jesa is for the dead people, but Catholic rituals is only for the God. So that's a difference of the Korean rituals and Catholicism ritual. Yeah. And Korean power distance and its comparison to Catholicism. So there's three aspects: view on equality, decision making, participation, opportunity. So when it comes to three aspects, they have all different kind of things. So when we looking at the Korean culture, actually age and status matter in view on equality, but otherwise Catholicism is different. All are equal before God, so they don't matter about age and status. And also decision making. In Korean culture, following higher status instruction without questions is really necessary for Korean people. But also when it comes to Catholicism, discussion allowed regardless of status, so it's kind of different. And lastly, participation opportunity. So in Korean culture, limited or gained permission by status or age, but in Catholicism, open to all members regardless of status or age. So last presentation, Korean customs or communications and its comparison to Catholicism. So since Korean has a high context, in expression styles is really different compared to Catholicism. Korean is more indirect and polite when they say something. However, in Catholicism, they say more direct than Korean, and then more sincere. Yeah, and last point, purpose of non-verbal communication. In that case, they also have differences. So in Korean, they hope others will read the situation with their mind. But in Catholicism, they use gesture to show their faith.
All right, now we're going to be talking about Ukrainian culture and Catholicism in Ukraine. So a little background on Ukrainian culture. Ukrainian people are really family and faith orientated. So they usually celebrate holidays like Easter and Christmas. They are a big part of Ukrainian culture because they're big holidays that every Ukrainian usually celebrates. Usually we celebrate it with church, music, and traditions. A lot of Ukrainians are Christians, which is similar to Catholicism. It's all in the same bracket. However, it also has its own differences from Catholic religion. So, yeah. And then Ukrainians also love food and hospitality. People love to cook and share meals like borscht, and then we also have dumplings with other people and guests. It's the biggest part of culture, sharing food and making food for others. It's something that Ukrainians absolutely love doing, so that's the biggest part. All right, now we're going to be looking at Ukrainian rituals in comparison to Catholicism. So Ukrainians celebrate holidays. Ukrainians and Catholics celebrate holidays like Easter, Christmas, but Ukrainians do bless their food and sing old songs during holidays, especially during Christmas. Ukrainians always go from door to door to like knock on people's houses and like sing like carols to them, like Christmas carols. That's the biggest thing that we do usually during Christmas. And then I'm not sure if Catholics do the same, but however they do sing Christmas carols in church during service, so that kind of like is similar. In church, Ukrainians go to church like Catholics, but their service are longer and more singing and icons. As I mentioned before, Ukrainians, the biggest part of Ukraine is usually Christian, and it's the same thing. However, it has its own differences. So as you can see here, our service are a little longer, and we do have more singing and more icons, but we do not have the Pope or the bishops. We have pastors instead. And then we also celebrate traditions. Ukrainians still do folk things like decorating eggs and celebrating nature holidays. For Easter, we usually paint eggs and celebrate holidays like around nature. And then Catholics usually celebrate Easter to celebrate the Jesus rising back from the dead. So, all right, now we are going to be looking at Ukrainian power distance and comparison to Catholicism. So Ukrainians are very respectful. They're respectful to their leaders and peers as well. So Ukrainians often show strong respect to parents, teachers, and church leaders like Catholics do with priests and Pope. We are very polite people, so just like in Catholic churches, people are very polite towards others, and that's the biggest thing. Traditions and rules, both value traditions and follow rules with less questioning of authority. Ukrainians usually are very obedient, so we do follow all the rules, and we don't usually cause a lot of trouble or anything like that. And then I feel like we compare the same to Catholic people because they're very obedient as well, because they do follow the Bible teachings and obedient towards their religion. So they kind of follow the Bible teachings and then live by the way the Bible tells them to live. So you kind of connect on that. And then the community roles, and both leaders guide the group, and then people are expected to follow and support them. Ukrainian communication and its comparison to Catholicism. So as I did mention before in the previous slides, Ukrainians are very polite people, so we do use respectful tone and speak calmly and show respect towards others. Like in a lot of Catholic churches where people talk in a gentle way. Usually in the church they talk calmly and in a gentle way towards others, and then they're always respectful towards their peers or even the younger people, because that's what their Bible teaches them to do. Also, the indirect style, Ukrainians may avoid saying things like indirectly and then to keep peace. They don't like starting arguments or confronting people in person, or just like starting Also, for the indirect style, Ukrainians may avoid saying things and directly to keep peace. They don't really like starting arguments or kind of confront people in person or just in general, because they would rather have peace and avoid the conflict with others, which is similar to how Catholics focus on kindness and forgiveness that is taught in the Bible. And Catholics are usually very kind people, and they do follow the Bible, and in the Bible it teaches that love, kindness, and forgiveness are the biggest things. So that's kind of similar to Ukrainians. And then the body language, both use respectful body language. Ukrainians may avoid too much eye contact with elders, especially just to show respect we don't really like talking directly, as I mentioned before. So avoiding eye contact kind of just helps us be more respectful. And then Catholics often use gestures like crossing themselves in the prayers. They do that usually in churches when they're praying, and then it's very similar to Ukrainians because we usually do the same. And then especially elder Ukrainian individuals, they cross themselves also when they're praying or before they're eating the food, just to bless themselves and to bless the food and others.
So now we're going to be looking into Mexican culture in regards to how they display and present Catholicism. Just a quick culture overview of Mexico. For starters, they are very family oriented, and they also have a subculture of machismo culture, which is basically just a masculine and male dominated oriented mindset. So you will see that a lot of people in Mexican culture will always serve the male first, or always put the male above themselves, because that's just the mindset there. And they're also very religious. Catholic religion is probably the #1 religion demonstrated in Mexico. So we can obviously see that they're going to be very heavily influenced in regards to their religion. And they are known for their very rich and vibrant culture, which also taps into Catholicism and how they actually do present it. And then they're also very patriotic and passionate about their culture and overall country. So they're passionate about Mexico, but they're also going to be passionate about Catholicism, because that is something very big and a part of their culture. So now we're going to be looking at Mexican rituals and its comparison to Catholicism. For Mexican rituals, we can actually see a lot of very similar, distinct similarities with Catholic rituals. A lot of it's going to be the same, but it's more celebrations that are kind of different. For instance, the Virgin Mary celebration, her birthday is on December 12th, and this is something very big in Mexican and Hispanic culture. On the 12th, they'll hold Mass in both English and Spanish. Specifically here in the United States, as a Catholic follower, I guess, I go to the Spanish Mass, and they also have big celebrations such as parties and a feast afterwards, because the Virgin Mary is something that's a big part of Hispanic and Mexican culture. And also we can see altars being displayed in Mexican rituals. Big religion we have in Mexico is Day of the Dead, where we celebrate our dead ones, and we set up altars and we put a lot of Catholic symbols, because we believe that essentially that they're being brought back to life for the day in this celebration. And in regards to Catholic rituals, we can obviously see that there is praying, and they are very sacrament focused, and that also taps into Mexican rituals. For instance, you obviously can't get married in the Catholic Church unless you have done your sacrament. So you have to do your baptism, communion, and confirmation. And in Mexican culture, they make sure that they push forward adults push forward their kids to do that at a young age, so that they're already prepped for that when they do decide to get married, because the right thing to do is to essentially be married in the Catholic Church. And then we're going to actually now look into Mexico power distance in comparison to Catholicism. So like I mentioned before, there is this machismo culture and mindset that puts the man above everybody else. And we can actually see this power distance in this statistic right here, found in a Sage Journals article. The world average power distance is 59.31%, which is basically 60%. But in Mexico, the power distance is 81%. And that is a big difference between the world average and then Mexico culture itself. And in Catholic religion, we can see that Pope, cardinals, archbishops, bishops, priests, and deacons, those are all above the laity. And the laity is basically just the common folk, and men, women, and children, all people who follow the Catholic religion. And all of these positions of power, they're all above essentially the common folk, and these are all positions that can only be held by men, which taps into, again, that machismo culture, and also how men are essentially put forward on a pedestal and above everybody else. And now here we can see Mexican customs and its communication versus Catholicism. Here in Mexico, they have a close proximity and a high context way of communication style. And they're also very polite and respectful. We could kind of mention this earlier on in the presentation, that because people are in the Catholic religion, they're essentially going to be more polite and respectful, because they're going to be following the teachings of the Bible. So that's why we can see that a lot of people from Mexico, since it's so heavily Catholic religion based, they are more polite and respectful because they are influenced by Catholic religion. And then here in Catholic religion, also proximity is valued, and then high context communication style as well. And they have very strong beliefs in regards to their religion and their teachings, but they are polite with it because, again, the Bible teaches that we should be like kind to our neighbor and stuff like that. So that's why a lot of people in Catholic religion and Mexican culture itself, they would be very much closer in regards to interacting, communicating with each other, and also making sure that they're being polite with that as well.
Hi everyone, my name is Victoria and I'm with
Hannah.
And today we're going to be interviewing you about Catholic religion. I have a couple questions that I want to ask you. So the first one is, what kind of things remind you of Catholic religion?
I mean, honestly, you kind of just see it around when people, just the way that people hold themselves. There's a whole lot of churches everywhere, so it's kind of just in the air in the buildings and just the way that people are, I guess. You can sense it in people, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that does. The other question is, how do Catholic traditions change in different countries?
Honestly, I'm not sure. But I do know that in my family, when it comes to Catholicism, it's really important to us that we follow our rules when it comes to like holidays. Holidays are very important. Family and the laws and kindness and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kyle. I'm here to interview with
Cedra.
And then I'm gonna ask some questions about Catholicism. So first question is, what do you associate it with Catholic culture in terms of symbols, traditions, or public celebrations?
Yeah, so as far as Catholic culture goes, definitely, of course, like the cross I associate with Catholic culture. I also associate like the ash on your forehead with Catholic culture, because I know that's done for like Ash Wednesday, I'm pretty sure, which is Catholic.
Yeah.
The idea of like a big church and like especially like really older churches, like European style, I kind of associate with Catholicism. What else? Like a crown of thorns, I feel, sheep, shepherds, sort of anything kind of under that.
And second question is, how do you think Catholic traditions might adapt or change with practiced in different cultural settings?
Yeah, so I love that question. I think a lot of people tend to, sort of embrace the parts of the religion that mesh well with the culture they're a part of. So I feel like Catholicism itself can look very different just all around the world. Let me actually read that question. Sure. How do I think it might adapt or change when practiced? I feel like certain holidays can adapt or change. I feel like the holidays that people want to celebrate, a lot of people will kind of, especially with colonization, will like take the colonizing like religion and kind of implement it with their own like religious practices that are more like that were maybe in their culture before. So I don't know, I could see like the holidays being slightly different as people are kind of meshing their culture into the religion as it spreads. So holidays, I think other like traditional things like wedding ceremonies, I imagine might change based on where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And third question will be, in your opinion, what role does religion, like Catholicism, playing in shaping power or authority in society?
Ooh, I feel like Catholicism is a very hierarchical religious structure, so I think it shapes power and authority through that hierarchy itself, right? Like there's a pope, and there's like, there is someone who kind of gets maybe more say in what Catholicism is supposed to look like and supposed to mean. So, yeah, I think it's also a little patriarchal in structure because, you know, we often associate God, you know, with a masculine energy, and Jesus is, of course, like a man. The Pope can only be a man, right? So I think it does give more power and authority to men in Catholic culture and societies.
Right, and the last question will be, how do you think Catholic customs might be influenced by local traditions or cultural values in different parts of the world?
Yeah, I think maybe in its expression, like, well, there's the main two places I associate with Catholicism are like parts of Europe and like specifically like Ireland, and then Latin America and like Central America. I know like Catholicism is super common in like South and Central America, and it's common in Ireland, but like those are two very different cultures, right? Like Irish culture is a little more, actually, I don't know, both cultures are pretty like outgoing. I guess Ireland is compared to the rest of Europe, but I feel like Irish Catholicism might be a little more like rigid than maybe Catholicism in Latin America. I have a lot of friends from Latin America who are Catholic, but like it's more of just like a thing that they are a part of or a thing they do rather than like a way of life, if that makes sense. Like I have friends who are kind of like have parts of their identity that Catholicism isn't inherently like accepting of, but they just kind of like, to them it's not necessarily about following the set structure of the rules as much as like just the belief and the faith and community. So yeah, like I have friends who are like, you know, like bisexual and Catholic, right? Which isn't something you would think, but I think different people view that their religious and faith, like their religious practice and faith differently. So kind of things like that.
All right. Thank you for answering the questions.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Hi, I'm here to interview with your name.
Hi, my name is Kangwon.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna ask some questions about Catholicism in Korean. So first question, 카톨릭 종교를 떠올리게 하는 것은 무엇인가요?
모르겠다. 제가 생각했을 때는 일단 성모 마리아나 그 카톨릭 신자들이 하는 기도 방법, 그런 손 모임들, 제스처들.
카톨릭 전통은 나라에 따라 어떻게 달라지나요?
일단 제 생각에는 일단 한국 예시를 들면은 일단 한국에서는 유교 뭐라 말하지? 그 유교 사상 때문에 한국에서는 카톨릭 사람들한테도 제사 지내는 걸, 조상들한테 제사 지내는 걸 허락하게 해줬다. 그래서 일단 우리나라에 있는 카톨릭 뭔가 예시.
Then third questions, 카톨릭과 같은 종교는 한 나라에 지도지 않았고요. 어떤 나라겠죠?
예를 들어서, 그러니까 일단 또 한국에서는 예를 들면 또 그 동성애 같은 거, 카톨릭에서는 동성애 이제 금기시 하니까 사실 한국에서도 동성애 결혼이 법적으로 금지돼 있잖아. 그래서 그런 것들, 카톨릭의 어떤 그런 윤리 사상들이 우리나라 정책에 반영되는 경우가 있다.
Yeah, that's. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you for watching and listening to our presentation. Here is a quick overview of all the references in regards to making this presentation happen.
Yeah, so a quick review of some of our sources. Number one is Catholicism Introduction, published by Boston College by McBrien R. The second one by Mackenzie J.L. and the editors of Encyclopedia Britannica. It's The Emergence of Roman Catholicism. The next by McIntosh K. is Woman in North America's Catholicism. And then we have Sieho J. and Hines, The Intersection of Faith, Spirituality, and Interreligious Engagement in Catholicism Schools, Teachers' Perspectives from Ireland and South Korea. And finally, from the Catholic News Agency, Things to Know About the Catholic Church in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you for watching our presentation, and we love intercultural communication.